Welcome back, everyone, to another live Mast Cell 360 show. I'm Jamie Fries-Miller, your host and health coach here at Mast Cell 360. Whether you're joining us live now or catching the replay later, we're so glad to have you with us today. As everyone's jumping on to the call, please feel free to drop in the comments where you're tuning in from. We really like to see how widespread this community is. These lives are all about empowering you on your mast cell journey with practical insights, expert guidance, and the support of our amazing community. Today's show is Neuro-Connection, Healing Pathways for Sensitive Systems. I'll be joined by our lead practitioners, Kimberly Quirk and Alex Bingham, as well as our nervous system support coach, Elle, and her mentor, expert guest, Anton Vannelli, who is the founder of the oh my goodness, I'm going to butcher it. I'm going to let him say it when he gets on. All right, guys, he just said it and it like flew out of my brain. Talk about brain fog. And I know you guys get that here at this community. So please forgive me for butchering that, Anton. All right. Disclaimers. This presentation is for informational and educational purposes. It is not meant to treat, diagnose, cure, or prevent illness, so be sure to discuss any health recommendations with your healthcare provider. Some of the links that we share during this presentation or on our website are affiliate links, which means Mast Cell 360 may take a very small commission if you purchase through our links. We only recommend products that we love and use personally or use in the Mast Cell 360 clinic. Okay, so just a reminder, if you were on last week with us live or you caught last week's replay, we have some exciting announcements. Mast Cell 360 is now on Substack. You can find us at mastcell360.substack.com. Just a reminder as well, we still have a few openings for appointments in November and December. You can find out more about how to apply to work with us at mastcell360.com/application. And we also have a gift guide coming soon. So that will be really exciting if you're getting into the holiday spirit and want to know what to tell your family members for some possible gift ideas. Okay. So I also just want to take a quick moment and give a shout out to Cam, one of the health coaches here at Mast Cell 360, for putting together our slides and our blog posts for us as well. So thank you so much, Cam, for working behind the scenes on this aspect of making sure that these lives happen and are as amazing as they are. And also a shout out to Zach, who will be helping answer some of the questions in the comments as well behind the scenes today. Okay, so let's bring to stage our guest, Anton, as well, who I'll introduce in just a second. We have Alex, Elle, and Kimberly all with us today. So Anton is the founder of, can you please say it for us?
The ATHIC system.
ATHIC system, yeah. And I've shared this with the community before, but I'm homeschooling my 6-year-old, and so now I read everything phonetically, and it just throws me off all of the time. So I really do apologize for that. Okay, so the ATHIC system is a mind-body connection program created by Anton himself from his own recovery after a serious accident, which left him with chronic pain. Over the past 8+ years and over 4,000 client hours, he has developed this unique approach that activates neurologically dormant muscles, which improves the brain-body map and helps regulate the nervous system. And you guys know we are all about regulating the nervous system here at Mast Cell 360. Anton's work empowers people recovering from trauma, dysregulation, and chronic illness to regain strength, function, and resilience. And he is currently writing a book on the subject, which we can't wait for it to come out, hopefully mid-next year. All right, so today we are going to be talking about why weak or inactive muscles contribute to pain, fatigue, and sensitivities, how tiny sensory inputs can help connect the body and calm mast cells, how to safely test when what your nervous system can tolerate, and ways that this can complement other healing supports, right? Because I always say the best nervous system supports are the ones you're actually going to do. And so in the beginning, when we're introducing a lot of clients to the nervous system aspect of healing, there's a lot of like trying things on and finding out what works best. And sometimes it's a couple different approaches, like whether it's limbic or vagal, and, you know, which ones fall into what. So I'd love, you know, we're going to dive into all that today for you guys. All right. And of course, if we have time at the end of the show, we will do a live Q&A. So feel free to throw your questions into the comments as we go along, right? Only ask your question one time, and please keep it on the topic of today's show. So kind of nervous system related MCAS. We're unable to answer off-topic questions or in-depth personal health questions. So please, and thank you for understanding that we're unable to do that. Okay. So let's get this conversation going. All right. Anton, can you tell us a little bit about how you kind of became interested in this work? Obviously, we shared a little bit about you had a personal experience, but then also how did you develop this method?
Yeah, so it was out of personal necessity, actually. And you know, thanks for having me on. It's an honor to be here and to talk with your community. Really appreciate being able to share my work. But it's not something that I ever had, you know, any thought of doing. I was in a car accident when I was about 23, 24, and I dealt with chronic back pain, sciatica, to the point where I'd, you know, be in bed for 3 days out of the week, that level, you know. And I went from, you know, an athlete, basketball, you know, football in high school, to not actually medically disabled, but, you know, fairly close. I could barely work. And it became one of those things where, you know, I tried, you know, various modalities. I tried, you know, chiropractic, I tried, you know, PT, I tried massage, you know, I tried like auricular acupuncture, I did stretching, I did lots of things. And some things made me a little bit better, and some things made me a little worse. And over time, I started to just get really, really passionate about the subject, because it was either that or basically kind of give up on the life that I knew. And I know a lot of the people that you work with, maybe you guys yourselves, you've dealt with chronic pain before in the past, you know, whether it was physical or, you know, some kind of trauma. So I started becoming extremely interested in researching the body and researching anatomy, and, you know, basically using my body to just self-experiment constantly. And some things would actually make me worse. Some things would put me down for a couple of days where I'd be in worse pain. But even the days where I had like 0.1% improvement, I looked at that as there was some level of improvement that was measurable, and I just didn't understand where it was coming from. So I thought about it that way. Eventually, I would have a breakthrough, and the breakthrough wouldn't have to do with any kind of stretching or any kind of strength work or anything like that. The breakthrough actually had to do with, and I'll kind of explain how it went, because this was when I started realizing that maybe it went a bit deeper. So I was laying in bed one night, and I was having like severe chronic pain, and I was just running my hand along my side, kind of just like this, I think to self-soothe when I was laying in bed. And pain was always on the left side of my body, both the sciatic and the back pain, the low back pain. It used to feel like there'd be like a knife in my calf all the time. I can only stand for maybe 10, 15 minutes at a time without that knife starting to dig deeper and deeper and deeper in. That's what it felt like. So I'm laying there in bed and running my hand along my side, and I think I just kind of soothed myself to sleep. I probably did it for 30 minutes to an hour. Well, I woke up in the morning and I went to roll out of bed, and I felt this like tearing sensation from like my entire flank area. And I rolled out of bed and I dropped to my knees, and I said, okay, what have I done this time? You know, how have I hurt myself this time? And so I very carefully got up, and I kind of limped around for most of the day. It felt like someone had taken a baseball bat to my side. That's what it felt like. I couldn't believe it. But I got halfway through the day and I realized something really profound, and I was like, I don't have any back pain. Where'd my back pain go? Where's my sciatica? Like, what? Like, how's this possible? I would spend about a year trying to recreate the phenomenon. I couldn't recreate it. I couldn't recreate it until I realized one day that what I had done was I had basically like showed my nervous system that this entire section of my body still existed. Just by running my hands along my side, I had basically like reawakened dormant musculature by getting my nervous system to recognize it. That was a big piece of the breakthrough. I then used that understanding to not only kind of solve the back problems that I had by getting my nervous system to see areas that it hadn't seen in a very, very long time, to solve the knee issues that I had, the shoulder issues that I had, the neck issues that I had from the whiplash, and I just kind of self-experimented through my body. Some of my friends that I knew at the time and family members, I would share some of my discoveries that were just personal at the time with them, and they wanted to try it, and so I just tried it with them, and it worked. And they got this idea in my head, like, hey, you should share this. You should share this. And so eventually, I started working with a few people and working with a few other people, and that's sort of how the physical side of my work was born. The nervous system side wouldn't come till later, actually. And this might make me a little emotional, so if it does, then apologies. But my wife suffered a severe mental health crisis during COVID. And she dealt with severe trauma for, she was, if this makes sense to your audience and to you guys, she was born drug addicted. So, she was abandoned, when she was 1 or 2 years old, at a drug house by her mother, that level of trauma. And so when she was sexually harassed at work, it basically triggered a lot of old trauma for her, and her nervous system started to spiral. And the doctors basically said, if you don't get her committed, maybe something really, really bad that happens to her. And she was having panic attacks. First, it was 6 times a day, then it was 8 times a day, then it was 10 times a day. She couldn't eat without having panic attacks. She couldn't go to the bathroom without having panic attacks. I was having to feed her. It was that level. So one day, she was curled up in a ball very, very, very tightly, and it looked like her abdominals were like flexed as hard as they could be. And I come up to her and I said, hey, are you okay? Does that hurt? And she looked at me and she said, I don't feel it. And it was like such a weird moment to me, because it triggered something in my head, because I hadn't realized, because for my work, for the physical stuff, I realized I couldn't sense and feel most of the left side of my body. That was the breakthrough for me. So when she said I couldn't feel it, I said, wait, that rings a bell. But I needed a couple weeks to think about it. And so I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. And I came to her a couple weeks later, and things were just getting progressively worse. I said, hey, I want to try something. Are you open to trying something? And she was. And what we found was that the second that her nervous system could register her abdominals properly and accurately, she could actually sense them accurately when she was in that panic attack, her panic attack stopped like that. And it was the only thing. Breathing work didn't work. It made her worse. And so I said, wait, hold on, how does that work? And so I designed a whole protocol around that for her, of helping her sense her body accurately, specifically to the abdominals and some other primary muscular systems. And she started getting better, and she got better, and she got better, and she was able to go back to work, and she was able to recover. And so I told a couple of the clients I was working with at the time that, hey, I've developed, this new protocol. I know they were dealing with, trauma, and they were dealing with, nervous system issues at the time. And they, hit therapists, and they have a team. And I said, hey, is this something something you're interested in? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to try it. And so that started with a very, very small group of people. And then those people referred other people, and those people referred other people. And before I knew it, I was doing this work, just about 50-50 with the physical work. And then the more I got into it, the more I realized that the physical side and the nervous system side are mirrors of each other. They're mirrors of each other. And that the more we can't accurately see, the nervous system can't accurately see the body, right? That's a direct reflection of the state of the nervous system itself. And as I help people restore that sensory accuracy, their nervous system started to regulate. And then they almost to the point of not even the word regulation started to fit. It was more like the brain no longer saw threat the same way. It was reprogramming threat, because the brain, first of all, people were no longer in physical pain, right? So then that high level elevation started to come down, but then also people learned how to control what was going on with their bodies. And that level of agency was a huge, huge piece to restoring a piece of safety. So that's, in essence, how I got here.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I know a lot of our own stories are vulnerable and, contribute to the work that we create in the world.
Yeah.
Elle, I know you've been working with Anton personally, because you too, Kate, had an experience that kind of led you to that level of work. And now, for those who don't know Elle, she's our emotional support and nervous system support coach here at Mast Cell 360. And so, Elle, do you want to share a little bit about your own personal journey and your discovery of this method and how it's helped you?
Yes, definitely, Jamie. Thank you. I would say that I've had multiple contributing factors over my life to my health and my just function in my body. I definitely have some diagnoses, but I definitely have some more functional differences that are less recognized by the medical system or challenging to be acknowledged or supported. And so even looking at like the whole person in general for lesser issues. And so over time, even for lesser issues, I had challenges getting good support with what was available through insurance and all of that. And then it got to this point where I was really had severe disconnection with my body. I didn't understand it, plus other health things. And so then I tried other advanced approaches, everything I could find locally, which is in San Antonio at the time and Bernie, that area. And they have a lot of approaches, even some in development too. But I found that, like Anton, some helped to some degree, some made it worse. And I'd had a sense, through all of this, it just had to be more. It just was challenging to find, even in therapy. And so I had connected with Anton, just, I don't know, it seemed random, but just, I don't know. It's one of those things you're like, it just changed the trajectory of your life because I still tried something else after I connected with him. And it's still, the PT was doing the most advanced approach in PT and that I, still know of on some level. And other than this, and, he reached a point and he was like, oh, I think yours is like, I think limbic system's involved. And I was like, I know it's involved. And he said, oh, well, I'm training in a few months. And I was like, oh, a few months. And you're just getting trained on it. I was like, oh, I met this guy. It includes polyvagal theory, limbic system, everything. I was like, I have to do it. I have to. And it was by distance, which was, I was like, I don't know what that's about, but let's try it. And so, and he seemed to be like, the main one who understood some level of what I was going through, even just a few chats, as opposed to like a few sessions with the PT. And so, we got the work started. Even with just in a month of just connecting more to my core, which I had severe issues, but especially following pregnancy and things like that, a couple of years later. And basically within a month, it shifted my nervous system on some level. Just having like more frame helped me have more emotional regulation. I was basically more of a container for that. And so it was able to allow more to come up and to be present with that instead of distracting from everything, from my body and everything. And it's still been a long road, just because we've had to, basically reprogram my neural pathways to like, 80 to maybe I'm at 85% now or something, but out of like 90 that was needed to be done. And so it's definitely been a journey. And so I'm really appreciative. I've been able to do some other training along the way, like neuro yoga, things like that. And then he was like, hey, I think you could do this. And so yeah. And when I started here, I wasn't sure exactly, how that was going to work, if I was going to implement that, because I was hired for the Safe and Sound protocol, which is great. But it seems like that's really, it's good to support the body first and then work on strengthening the ear, at least middle ear. And so at least to some degree, and they work well together. And so I found that people responded best if we started with that when possible. Not everybody has different places to start sometimes, but it's definitely something to check out. I know Anton's going to talk more about how to tell where somebody's at and how to proceed.
Yeah. So you guys both kind of talked a little bit about like that physical aspect and obviously the neuro-connection to it. So for those new to like neurosensory activation, can we give a more like high level overview of what this work is and what does it actually do to help support the nervous system, Anton?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the most simple ways of kind of putting it is that the body can't use what the brain can't see. And I think one of the biggest assumptions is that, especially when we do strength work or we try to do rehab work, right? And this applies, across the board, is that there's an assumption that's been made that the nervous system can accurately see. Okay, so if we think about like the people that are struggling, with their bodies, a lot of people that have, nervous system issues, they'll have knee problems, they'll have back problems, they'll have neck problems, right? And a lot of that is seen as, part of the trauma response. And a lot of that is seen as just their bodies have broken down over time. And the more they try to strengthen them, the more they hurt, or they can strengthen them to a point and it doesn't really ever, they can't fully solve the problem, right? But like for my body, like from what I found with the car accident was that, like, I'll give you an example, like my right bicep, like I've had multiple injuries over the years, both basketball and then the car accident that impacted my right shoulder, right? So most people would assume that I have a shoulder and a neck issue. But what I found in my work was that while yes, I did have a shoulder and a neck issue in terms of tension and pain, what I had was actually a sensory accuracy issue. And this is something that like people can test, but we'll get into this later. I'll just give an example from my own body. Like you would assume that if I were to flex my bicep, I'd look like a fairly fit individual, right? That I would be able to sense and feel my bicep accurately. Like I attempt to flex my bicep, right? And then I'd be able to sense it accurately. But what I found when I had really significant shoulder problems was I couldn't. The only thing that I could sense and feel when I flexed my bicep was my shoulder and my neck, right? The only thing that I could sense and feel when I looked to sense my rhomboids and mid-lower traps, which are essential muscles to help stabilize the shoulder itself, was my upper trap. My nervous system couldn't accurately see those systems anymore, the ones that I needed. So the more I tried to strengthen myself, the more I tried to do things to strengthen, the worse I got. Or it would help briefly, and then it would go back to what it was. I've worked with so many people who thought that their bodies were broken. Like rehab doesn't work, this doesn't work, nothing works for me. When really the primary issue was the nervous system could no longer accurately see. And I think that's one of the most powerful things, I think, is that for people to understand that there's maybe another way to look at the physical issues that they've had. Because if you have back problems that have persisted for 15 to 20 years, right, you have a constant state of threat that your nervous system is aware of. Like your nervous system is keeping muscles tight. There's systems that it doesn't trust. And from what my work has shown is there's systems that it can't see. When you bring the sensory perception of the nervous system back to some of those primary muscles, suddenly the nervous system says, I can see accurately. And that downshifts threat and that downshifts error prediction for the nervous system itself. Right. So give another example, right? So for me, in the car accident that I was in, I had severe low back pain, severe sciatic issues. What did I find? I couldn't sense or feel my left quadricep at all. The only thing I would feel when going into extension with my leg was my hamstring and my low back. It's the only thing I could sense. My nervous system could no longer accurately see my quadricep, right? So all these back things that I thought that I had ended up actually being a sensory accuracy problem with both my oblique, my quadricep, and my glute primarily. So, I mean, it's a different way of looking at it, and there are ways of testing it, right? And that's how I was able to work with Elle via remote, because this is about perception. It's about being able to read the nervous system itself, and what you sense and what you feel is a direct reflection of that. Does that help? I can keep kind of discussing it, but
yeah. Alex and Kimberly, do you have any questions for Anton on kind of the system and how it's working so far for him to go?
The question that was coming up for me was more like, it almost was like a body trauma is shutting off something to that area. Is that correct? Like,
It can, but also emotional trauma or any level of trauma will blur the nervous system's view of an area of the body. So for example, like let's say that someone has, this is really common. When they get really stressed, their back hurts or their neck hurts, right? What that represents is that the nervous system is saying, when I'm under threat, I must protect something very specific. So usually there's some kind of encoded message from the nervous system that believes that this area must become tighter to protect me. But in tightening the area, what happens is the nervous system loses sight of the other stabilizing, supporting muscles. The more these get represented to the nervous system, the less it can see anything else, right? So it becomes more and more and more dominant over time. The first time I attempted to flex my right pec when I was having severe neck issues with I couldn't even do push-up anymore. The first time I attempted to even flex this, I had a spasm that shot right down my neck. And I was like, there's a connection between what's going on at my pec and what's going on with my neck. And why would that be? Well, if we understand a bit about anatomy and mechanics, if my nervous system would lose sight of my pec major, it would have to then bring dominance to pec minor and dominance to anterior delt. So every time I'd been attempting to stabilize this system, I was drawing my shoulder further in, and all of these systems absolutely connect. So by restoring sensory accuracy to my pec, I resolve this problem. I know it's not a direct line, but the nervous system does see it as a direct line. It says, well, if I can't stabilize through this, I'll use the next system.
Yeah, a lot of our clients deal with cervical instability.
Yep.
Is a huge one in EDS and hypermobility. So for sure, right? The vagal nerve running through there.
Absolutely.
Hard to, like, if you've done all the other nervous system stuff, that can be kind of keep someone stuck, right? In that hypervigilant state.
Yeah, like our capacity matters a tremendous amount to our level of safety. I think that's something that's not talked about very much. Like, for example, like if someone would have told me, and this is my example, and I'll let Lachey talk to this a bit, she's got more personal experience as far as the cervical instability, right? But if someone would have told me 10 years ago, hey, go for a hike, go walking, I immediately would have told you right off the bat, I can't do that, right? So what that signals is that, like, I understood, even if I didn't understand consciously, that's not a safe thing for my body to do, right? Having a nervous system that's aware of the limitations at that extent, right? You're always in a state of elevation, right? Because your capacity is so much lower. So restoring like sensory accuracy and then being able to use things accurately and not feeling nearly as much pain, and then eventually getting to the point where you can start strengthening because you can actually sense the correct systems, you're gonna increase your overall capacity. The nervous system's gonna say, I can do more, not less. And that can drive a tremendous amount of safety. That's not the only thing, but that's a piece of it. But I'll let Lachey talk about kind of her experience with the cervical instability and sort of this concept of capacity and how that shifted for her, because she's got a much more personal experience on that.
And we have Ivy asking, what is cervical instability? So that might be helpful to hit on.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. So cervical instability. So cervical spine is your neck. And so you get instability there. Normally, so there's a lot of paradoxes here where we have neck pain, we have tension, but the overcompensation, the adapting, the guarding, it all goes towards basically constriction and locking muscles. And so you may not realize that that's actually a weakness, whether a muscle is constricted and tight or more apparently weak, lax. Those are all weakness. And it's basically, and there's a lot of different causes, and you can look at that. And I know I've seen it a lot with like broad spectrum antibiotics, at least some of them, certain classes of them. But basically something has created that disconnect with the brain and body. And we see that with the core, which, abdomen, obliques, quads, all of those are major systems. And we see that with trauma as well. And so there's these patterns that shift in the body. And again, the brain's reaching for whatever it can grab instead. And so you may not realize, between the tension and the compensations, you may not realize the level of disconnect and weakness, basically mixing up our pathways. And so within that, we can have cervical instability, and you may notice it more just overall weakness or like for me, it was going to different providers who were like, yeah, let's release this locked muscle. And it was like, oh, wait a second, what is this? And after years of just providers, just focusing on the area and everything, there was something that was very powerful at recognizing, like, no, we have muscle systems, and some of these are, as Anton's explained to me, like decades old. Physical therapy used to actually do a bit more towards understanding that, towards working with the systems. And now it's like athletes, minor issues, let's just adjust a little bit, help the brain, remember where it just was. But again, so many of us have more complex histories than that. And so it's not this linear quick fix. And so being able to recognize that and support from that is really powerful. And again, there's studies that show the more stability we have, the more strength we have, the better the brain is actually able to process between the safety, but I would also just more direct neural pathways, not winding, not all the compensations. And so when we support that, then it actually enables you to strengthen your neck. Until then, you don't have the stability for it. You're not having that access to really do a lot there. And that's why it's important with the vagus nerve, because you can do all these exercises, you can hum, you can do all of that, but unless you have that strength there and you have the foundations for that, then it's just not going to support at that capacity. You can make some progress, you can help cope for sure, but we have some people that will do that like throughout the whole day, just trying to cope. And we want to support people to where they can actually, be able to make progress in that.
Can I share?
I mean, we talk a lot.
Oh, go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go.
Can
I share a client example about how something that would look like a neck problem that was more nervous system based? Would that be helpful for your audience? Okay.
I think so, yeah.
I was working with a client who historically had like tremendous tension through her neck, not Lachey, a different client, a young lady actually. And anytime she got any kind of body work done to the neck, right, to try to release what was basically like just iron through her upper traps and her neck and her scalenes, she'd have migraines for days at a time. Right. And she always thought that was a strange response, but never really cataloged it. Right. What we found was that any kind of relaxation or breathing aspect, or even putting her hand on her neck and trying to kind of like breathe any of the muscle tension down using the vagus nerve, would immediately go, she'd feel a slight release and then it would lock up even more. You could see it right in session, right? So what their nervous system was saying was like, I don't feel safe enough releasing this protection mechanism. I don't feel safe enough releasing this. So I said, okay, fine. And so what we did is we said, okay, forget about the neck for now. I just want you to kind of connect with that kind of like sensory accuracy through your body in different ways. Like I want you to be able to sense your quads accurately and sense your abdominals accurately and sense these other systems, right? And so we worked on those things. And we came back to the neck in maybe like a month or so. And suddenly she could feel more release through the neck. The neck was actually starting to open up a bit, right? Months went on, and eventually her global neck tension actually reduced to the point where we could actually work on muscles around like the biceps, the pecs, muscles of the back to stabilize without any of that guarding response. So what does that say, right? Is that timing matters, understanding the way the nervous system views things matters, understanding your level of sensitivity. Like if we would have pushed into her neck, I would have destabilized her nervous system. I would have pushed her into a state of sympathetic fight or flight, right? So instead, creating a different baseline of safety for the nervous system itself allowed us to then work into those areas. And then what we ended up finding out later on was that there were specific times in her life which you didn't actually see were connected because they were very, very short amounts of time where she had dealt in a previous relationship with severe trauma, and the trauma was directly to the back of her head, right? And so then all the pieces fit why the nervous system would be so concerned about the head and the neck, right? So in order for her to release that system, her nervous system had to be very convinced that she was safe, right? Because that was the time where she felt the most unsafe, and it was coded in the body. Hopefully, I don't know if that's helpful.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so how does this approach, we've talked a little bit about like physical therapy and like manipulation, like that physical manipulation. A lot of people think, oh, like I'll go to the chiropractor. I personally would get air hunger after an adjustment at the chiropractor, never realizing that connection until I like started understanding mast cell activation syndrome. So how does this approach differ from other nervous system tools like vagus nerve exercises, PT, or somatic therapy?
So I'm a really big fan of strengthening work and PT. I'm a really big fan of chiropractic. Not the really hard snap stuff, because that's been hard. That was harder on my nervous system. Some people are great with it. Some athletes are really great with it. It works really well. I'm a really big fan of massage, LMT work. I'm a really big fan of vagus nerve work. I think that there are multiple modalities that are helpful to people, right? And there are many stories about people that have had tremendous improvement using those modalities. So I'm not one to put down anyone's work. Where I see my work fit in is, once again, when we talk about early on, there's a gap in perception of the nervous system itself. So what my work does is it helps solve that gap. And what I've seen, and this is why I get referrals from LMTs, from chiropractors, from PTs, right? Because it helps their work even better. Because the nervous system says, I see this accurately now, right? So then maybe the lunge that was supposed to strengthen your knee, that actually, hurt your knee, now strengthens your knee instead of hurting your knee. Maybe the chiropractic adjustment that you couldn't hold, or that created some kind of sympathetic response to your nervous system, now is something that your nervous system says, actually, no, we can maintain that, we can manage that, because we see the systems required to be able to hold that adjustment, right? For LMT, I've had clients tell me that, like, I've never really been able to have this area worked on, and now I can, right? Things like that. Helping people. So the way I see it is that it helps people, if those modalities aren't functioning the way that they want, it can really help open the doors to make those modalities even more effective. So that's kind of how I see it. And I don't know what Lachey's experience is with that. It'd be good to hear from her.
Yeah, very, very similar. And also to notice that idea too, like neuroplasticity, how, when we're younger, we have a lot more like children and everything. And there's also less time for compensations to build and everything. And so things like, primitive reflex integration and craniosacral therapy can be extra effective when younger. But we see as we go along with those continued developmental changes, other factors, that there is still a gap even with that. I know I tried some reflex integration and I started to feel great. And then again, it was like, oh, something's missing. This isn't holding. And then similar with somatic therapy, I actually since also become an associate level therapist. And I actually bring this work in too, because again, there's all these different factors, whether it's the nervous system, the body, all these things, this guarding. And I find that it's, again, building that capacity first for the nervous system, for the emotions. That's what allows us to more safely bring up what we need to face. There's a reason why we blocked it, and there's a reason why we couldn't be with that. And that's part of that innate intelligence part of our system is to go, like, at certain times in our life, where that's the point of trauma is, the capacity wasn't there to be present with oneself or have somebody with us. And so now there's these aspects that have still felt off limits, and we've gotten more weak usually, and still the brain's like, it's more unsafe. And so I know for me, even, trying to get help before, I had to go very indirectly instead of going right to it, and build in that connection and safety and get to where I could be more in the present feel safe being in the present and be more automatic, so that I could process things in a way that was more safe, instead of, because otherwise we're more ungrounded, we're up here, and our brain doesn't know that we're in the present and that we're safe. It thinks we're in the past still, or we're anticipating. And so to be able to just all of our systems to know, and ourself to know, I'm in the present now, and I'm strong, I'm capable, I can run if I need to, I can fight if I need to. It's just all more automatic, and that's what shapes how we perceive now.
I think one of the things you mentioned too, you said, how does it relate to like polyvagal work or other somatic work, right? So I think one of the things to think about is, if we go back to sort of that like sensory map idea, right? In terms of like that I couldn't sense my bicep correctly, that I can't sense correctly. And I think what would be stunning to everyone in your audience, and probably you guys too, is the level of sensory inaccuracy present in every single person. It's stunning. Even with high level athletes, I work with, college, I've worked with pro athletes, stuff like that. Like, it's incredibly common. But the thing is that usually those are like locational errors, right? Generally speaking, not global. When I work with people that have had severe nervous system issues, right, like Lachey, it's a global disconnect. It's a global fragmentation of what the nervous system can and can't see. So what that does, even if we're unaware of it, is it creates moment-to-moment error messages from the nervous system. That's pain, that's prediction. The nervous system doesn't know where your systems are. We feel them. I feel my bicep, right? I know my bicep's there. My nervous system doesn't. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand, right? Is that a lot of the physical issues that they're having a lot of them are being driven by this sensory inaccuracy. And so if you think about going and doing somatic work, and I'm doing breathing work, and I'm doing polyvagal work, and I get a tremendous response to my parasympathetic nervous system, and I'm able to downshift, and it feels amazing. That's awesome. That's fantastic. That's the best of the best, right? But a lot of people, especially highly sensitive people, they don't get that shift. And they feel like, why can't I get that shift? Like, I don't understand what's wrong with me. Well, it's complex. There's nothing wrong per se. It's the nervous system doesn't believe it's safe enough to downshift.
Mm-hmm.
Think of downshifting as a way of the nervous system saying, okay, everything's safe. I can come down a level in terms of my elevated threat response. But then think back to all the error messages about what the nervous system can and can't see. Why would it allow a downshift, a powerful one, if the map is completely fragmented? If you're having back pain, if you're having knee pain, if you're having neck pain, all these things, right? The nervous system is saying, I can't see myself accurately. And yet we're trying to say at the same time, I'm safe. So there's a conflict. And so what my work does is it solves part of that conflict, right? And that's why it allows a lot of other things to work really, really well. Because then the nervous system says, I see myself. I see myself accurately. So then the error prediction goes down, pain goes down, all those things go down, function increases, capacity goes up, strength ends up increasing. Because you can actually get hypertrophy from muscles that the nervous system can accurately see. That's one of the reasons that people with hyper dysregulated nervous systems will be very, very thin or feeling very weak for most of their life. And yet when you test that accuracy, they don't feel and they don't sense, right? And so hopefully that's helpful in understanding sort of like how that ties to safety, and then also like how the work is different from like traditional somatic and like polyvagal and like breathing work and things like that, humming and stuff like that.
So can I ask a question?
Sure.
So I'm imagining a person coming to me with neck pain.
Yes.
And they haven't tried any of these other treatments. And so an evaluation shows tightness and maybe something like massage or chiropractic, craniosacral, whatever treatment you decide would be a good one. I'm imagining that treatment then might make them feel worse or wouldn't help, or help temporarily, and then they'd feel worse. And so it kind of tells you that something else is going on. Okay, so how do you figure out where the other misconnections are? Because they're feeling the neck pain.
Such a good question. Such a great question. So The sensory map I'm talking about follows strict biomechanical principles. So for example, if someone has neck pain, right, I understand that there's a likely chance that they can't integrate, or the nervous system can't see primary systems that are responsible for stabilizing this area, right? So primarily the bicep, as the bicep connects to my scapula, the pec, because of pec major fails, pec minor will become dominant and it will shift the entire shoulder position. And then my mid to lower traps, because of how well when they fire correctly, that it pulls my entire scapula back. So I understand the muscles that I need to check to see if the nervous system can see them accurately. And what I found with every single neck client that I've worked with over the past 8 years is that there's one of those systems always the nervous system cannot see accurately. And when I mean see accurately, I mean when they go to use some very low level isometric contraction of the area, they actually don't sense the area at all, or they sense other things compensating instantly, right? Which is another reason why exercise and why rehab work can fail sometimes for people, because if we can't create that sensory perception of that area without weight, how would we do it with? How on earth would we do it with weight or with load? So does that answer your question?
It does. And so depending on what area the person comes in with their initial complaint would determine what kind of, did you say biomechanical or biochemical?
It follows, yeah, the sensory map, basically what the nervous system can and can't see, it follows biomechanical principles like strictly.
And so if it was a knee pain, you might be starting with different places like the quads, the glutes, the whatever. Over time, you would have a way of approaching each person's pain with a simple assessment.
Very, very simple. And I don't have to touch or manipulate. I just ask what is sensed. Like a great one for knee pain. And you guys can even test this yourself, you guys right here. And for anyone in your audience, if you're more sensitive to anything, I would say hold off. But you guys can test this. You can just gently, very gently push your foot against the floor. And you ask yourself, what feedback do you actually get? Do you sense knee? Do you sense quadricep? Do you sense hip? Do you sense calf? What do you actually sense when you gently push your foot against the floor? And I'll let you guys all kind of answer. What do you actually sense when you just gently push your foot against the floor?
My initial is here until I relax a little more.
Okay. So initially, the nervous system guards the neck, which fits.
Yep.
I would say knee and shin.
So knee and shin, and then for you, Alex?
Calf, hamstring, glute.
Calf, hamstring, glute, and then how about for you, Jamie?
A little bit my thigh, a little bit my lower back.
Okay, so now I want all of you just.
I was sitting really weird.
Yeah,
I'm like a weird sitter.
All of you just gently rub your quadricep, just sort of like this, very, very gently, for maybe 10 seconds or so, just like that. And 3, 2, 1, and now gently, gently push against the floor with the same leg, and tell me what you feel.
Inner knee.
Mm-hmm. How about for you? What'd you feel that time, Alex? What'd you feel that time, Kimberly or Lachey?
I felt the quad again, the glute, inside the knee.
Okay.
Not as much the calf.
So did it shift at all from them the first time for anyone?
Yeah.
Better.
So all of you, it shifted. So what that means, the nervous system went, you mean that system? That's the one you want to fire? That's how fast you can test it.
And it's interesting that you want to feel the knee.
You want to feel the quad.
The quad. Oh, okay. So you're touching the system that you want to feel.
Exactly. 100%. You're giving the nervous system input of the correct system that should be primary. And the system has a chance to respond.
So is that the test? So a lot of our community reacts to even supportive things, right? A lot of the things that we've talked about. Some people aren't ready for breathing. Some people aren't ready for brain retraining, limbic.
Yeah.
So, and you talked about this, doing the right things in the right order and things like that. Is that the test that you would have someone do, or how do you test someone's nervous system to see what they tolerate before you introduce.
So I need to understand their history a bit. I need to understand their level of sensitivity. I'll ask them like, when you get massage work, you've got body work or things like that. How do you feel? If they're like, oh no, I don't do any body work. I'm like, okay, that I register that, right? So I try to get a feel for the level of sensitivity. And then also the area of the body matters a lot to the nervous system. Like there are going to be areas of the body that the nervous system says, yeah, that's an okay thing for me to integrate with. And there's going to be areas where it says absolutely not. Like I've had work with clients who couldn't even put their hands here. They just couldn't. They'd have intense shooting pain and nausea if they put their hands here at all, right? But if they put their hands on their legs, they were fine. I've had clients where it was the opposite. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be very, very individualized at that high level of sensitivity of what the brain thinks is safe and what the brain doesn't think is safe. And that needs to be something that you sort of kind of suss out, right? You need to be able to tell. The test that I just gave you as far as the quadricep one, generally speaking, the quadriceps are fairly neutral to the nervous system. Fairly neutral. The areas of the core are not. So the abdominals usually aren't, right? So the biceps can be neutral, right? But the quads are a decent test. If someone's hypersensitive and they're afraid of testing something like that, they can also close their eyes and they can visualize running their hands on their legs and see just over 5 seconds. How do you feel with that? What does your nervous system tell you? Is that a neutral test? Great. So then gently push your foot against the floor. See what you feel in terms of sensation, then close your eyes and visualize that touch on your leg, and then do the test again. And if that's a neutral test, then maybe we could move on from there. So there are ways of backing it all the way up, right? And there are ways of because you want to desensitize the nervous system basically to that level of input and that level of information, especially for people that are hypersensitive. But you can all tell that just even in that test that I just gave you, that things that we would assume are like, maybe you've never had a knee issue, maybe you've never had a hip issue, but occasionally maybe the hip will get a little tight. Like that story right there could be the reason why.
Awesome. I'd love to get into some questions from our audience, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure. That's great. Absolutely.
Okay. So Molly's asking, have you helped people with dysautonomia and MCAS?
Yes, I have.
Yes. And then also, M or L, M, L is starting to do this with our clients who do have MCAS. So it is doable with MCAS. Okay. Lauren's asking if you work with kids, questioning a child that they see with tic disorder already does SSP, but not working with anyone specific.
Yeah, so I love working with kids because the brain is so plastic. It's so incredibly plastic, and the nervous system can be shifted, and their level of sensory perception can be shifted so quickly. I was working with an individual who his parents kind of labeled him as neurodivergent, and he was having issues running. When he would run, he would trip over his own feet, and he was doing it pretty consistently. He was nonverbal till he was about 6 or 7 years old, right? So he'd done a lot of early rehab work, a lot of I believe primal movement work, a lot of things like that, which had helped him quite a bit. He did a lot of rehab for his speech, and all of that stuff was very, very helpful. But he was still running through this issue where he would trip over his own feet, and his coordination just wasn't very good. So the very first time that I worked with him was over a video like this. I asked him to, and I'll go and demonstrate real quick. I asked him to go ahead and just gently extend his leg out like this, right? Can you go ahead and extend your leg out? And he went and he did this. He goes. So in order for him to lift his leg, his nervous system thought he needed to contract his body like this. And so I said, okay, obviously that's probably not something that the nervous system can see accurately. So all I had him do is rub his leg. And I said, do you feel heat or warmth in your leg? And he goes, yeah. And I said, extend your leg out again. And he did half the contraction. I didn't tell him to move differently. And over the course of the next 5 or 10 minutes, he was able to extend his leg perfectly straight without any contraction because his nervous system could accurately see it again. I did tests as far as assessments for almost every single primary muscle of his body, and his nervous system could not see them accurately. When I first asked him to gently flex his glutes, his back jumped off the floor. He flexed his back into hyperextension. He's 8 years old. So I love working with kids and being able to help the nervous system remodel these pathways specifically. I think it's incredibly powerful when they're young. There's definitely some genetic predispositions to some of this stuff. Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that the nervous system doesn't have a chance to see accurately. We can program it that way. And I've done it multiple times. So, yeah.
Okay. Wondering how this might be used for hives, fatigue, brain fog associated with mast cell triggered by mold. Reiki master, Reiki's helped, but curious how this might apply.
That's a really great question too. I have a couple of clients who practice Reiki, and I have actually a lady who's across the sea in UK who's actually a Reiki master, who ended up coming to me because specifically the problem she was having was that when she was triggered or when she'd get really, really stressed, she couldn't actually go up her stairs anymore. Her body would become that weak, right? And so what we found, once again, was this similar pattern of disconnection and sensory inaccuracy through basically most of her body. So when you're asking about how it could be used for hives, fatigue, and brain fog, so the hives, fatigue, and brain fog are likely a more elevated response to threat, right? And so if mold is triggering it, right, and your nervous system is staying at a hyper elevated state, then anything you can do to prove to the nervous system that you're safer would be something very, very powerful. So your Reiki and being a Reiki master has probably helped you regulate your nervous system greatly. And so you saying it's helped a lot makes perfect sense for me in terms of how the nervous system would see that. However, that being said, in terms of some of those those neuro-connections, and as far as those sensory connections, you may notice with your own body, even with Reiki and being a Reiki master, there may be areas that you still have little aches or pains or little things that you feel more when you're stressed. And a lot of that is evidence about some of that inaccuracy of the sensory system that we're talking about. So what I would say, and I'll let Lachey actually talk to this, like when you've been triggered or when you've been, feeling more elevated, right? What has the work helped you do? Lachey?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, guys. My question was, when you've been triggered and you've been elevated, right, through life, like what has the work helped you do?
Yes, I would say that it definitely helps. I mean, it helps cope in the moment to some degree, but it's also helping again to shift that safety over time. And if we want to, get more into the nervous system too, everything's connected to start with, but also our motor neurons, that's cellular. And so we have our fight or flight responses, freeze, those are all survival stress responses. And so, and I'm seeing more research on that cell danger response. I may not use that term as much yet still, but that's basically those are happening together. And so, yes, we do take out some things with, that are triggering more, food, environment, all those things, but we also want to support those patterns of those responses, those over responses. And so even though, when you're in mold, or even when you don't, there can definitely still be the shift in the nervous system one way or the other, as the nervous system does start to shift those patterns in response. It's identified something as a threat, and then you know about it too, and then that has another factor basically of what you're kind of fielding here, and that's both. I would say before it's more subconscious. You're not aware of it. When you have that awareness too, there's also this conscious level of there's a threat, and so. Our cells are responding accordingly as well. And to be able to support in that, it is this whole person support. It is integrating. It is this frame of the body, the brain-body connection, as well as the mind-body connection. And they all track together. And so to be able to shift that, we want to support that. We also want to support our mindset on some level. We want to support emotionally, but also understand how those interact.
And I'll add too, one of the things that sets Mast Cell 360 apart from like other type of practitioners in the conventional world is that we're focusing specifically on stabilizing the mast cells. And so, nervous system is at the top of that for us. But then, we can look at things like avoiding those triggers. So if it's triggered by mold, have you completely gotten out of mold? Have you detoxed mold? If you're not stabilized enough to detox mold, have you onboarded mast cell supports? How are your detox pathways, right? So, like Elle said, it's, looking at the whole body approach, and also like just nervous system is one aspect of stabilizing. Could there be other supports that can be used as bridges to get you to that whole level body of healing?
Yeah, I also wanted to add too that in my experience, my detox pathways were really off, partly because I was so disconnected from my body. And then I also had limited movement because of that. And both of those affected my detox pathway, especially the lymphatic system. So to be able to... the vagus nerve being connected to your, digestive organs and motility. We've seen people whose detox pathways are backed up in constipation. And once they work on the nervous system, sometimes that alone can support that detox pathway. Yes. Yeah. And then we work on safety a little bit too, as far as what is safe enough? How can we feel, even when we have some ongoing things that we're dealing with in our environments, whether it's family or mold or, or job or things like that, how do we acknowledge that's going on, and how can I get supported to feel safe enough or to be able to take action that's needed? And part of that's being in the present as opposed to just consumed by all of that. Yeah, so that kind of answers Rose's question. How does that work with people that deal with histamine intolerance issues or gut issues, right? So we're working on supporting the body to calm down those cells so that, we can open up those detox pathways. And Kimberly or Alex, do you have anything to add here for Rose or Elle, Anton, anyone who wants to support that?
I mean, a lot of what you were saying, right, Jamie, of just, mast cell supports, look at your environment, like looking at all the levels and looking at the whole person. Yeah, and we have that direct, when we're supporting our body, we're getting those neural pathways that do affect function and strength and everything. So you're directly supporting your digestive system when you're building in more connection. And then you have the nervous system aspect of it too, which are autonomic nervous system, that's just running the show behind the scenes. And so that's when you're able to be more in that window of tolerance, window of regulation, that's where you get to have a better functioning nervous system. So we're shifting towards more consistency with that. So you can see some shifts early on, but depending upon what else is going on, it can take a bit to get to where it's more consistent, but that's where you're going to see the most benefit from it.
One thing I was thinking is that it really comes down to safety. And just like what Anton and Elle are talking about in terms that you can't locate or your nervous system isn't sensing part of your body. It could also be that, you've got mast cell issues. You try to give a supplement that might theoretically help to calm that down, but your nervous system is seeing anything that's coming into your body as a threat. And so you're somehow having to ask permission from your nervous system to even start that process. And if you're finding that any even tiny amounts of things are giving reaction, especially if they're reacting even while it's in your mouth and you haven't even swallowed yet, clear message that it's a nervous system. But I'm still stuck with the difficulty of assessing where and how to exactly approach that. There are programs that might work for some people and not others. And it seems like the goal for us as practitioners is to develop a toolkit that's so big that we can somehow help to guide people no matter where their imbalance lies.
I think that was extremely well said about that the nervous system needs permission. I think that's extremely well said. That's exactly it. And I want to talk real quick on how most people with gut issues, a lot of physical pain, hyper dysregulated or very dysregulated nervous systems have been locked out of their parasympathetic nervous system for basically most of their life and are unaware of it. the nervous system doesn't tell us that we're in a state of fight or flight. There's contextual information. Contextual information about how triggered we can become, about how we react to our environment, our body feels, things like that. So we have to gather contextual information because the brain normalizes our condition. So if you've been in fight or flight since you were 6 or 7, for whatever reason, you're not going to know it. You're going to know it through contextual information. So it's really hard for people to be able to tell. People that have had gut issues forever, but then they respond to stress by, they have, hives or rashes or things like that, right? It's very likely their systems have been dysregulated for a long time. It's kind of a similar issue where, for example, like, even for myself, like I had shoulder issues for years. I never knew I couldn't sense my bicep accurately. The nervous system doesn't tell us. They're gaps. And so we normalize, the brain normalizes us to whatever our condition is. And so I think one of the big things when people are looking at their health in general is they don't understand what level of dysregulation or fight or flight or threat they've been under for a very long time. And so one of the things I think is a really powerful thing is when people start really kind of diving into polyvagal and understanding threat and understanding the nervous systems, and they really start realizing like, wow, I've been in a constant state of stress since I was 5 or 6, or since I was born, or since I was 10. And a lot of people can also point to a fact of like, you know what, I was doing pretty good until I had that car accident at 12, and then I've never been the same. Right. So these big life events can trigger. And I think this talks about, the mast cell issue, like people will have these triggers that come from stress. Right. Well, that's a direct line to that moment that dysregulated their nervous system, the moment where the nervous system said, I'm no longer safe at a baseline level. So what you said about permission is just beautifully said.
Yeah, I also want to add that I've worked with people in coaching and therapy already that they don't even know, they're so disconnected that they're not aware that there is disconnection or pain. And like I had somebody who's had arthritic diagnosis since a teen. Can you imagine that? And kind of jumping to where like, oh, general autoimmune stuff, and asked her about, oh, do you have pain in your tissue? No, just joints. Next session, she says, well, okay, maybe, I can't really, I have a lot of pain if I touch my tissue. And I was like, okay. And then the next one was, yeah, actually before the joint pain, I did have shooting pain in my body, but then it stopped and I forgot about it. And so then she went and got tested for fibromyalgia. It's like that usually precedes the others, but we don't know it because it could be constricted or disconnected. There's so many presentations. And I've had, just this whole range, somebody who was like, oh, I don't feel anything all day. And then at night I feel all this pain. She's like, I think it's in my head. And I was like, no, your brain is protecting you from it until you're trying to relax and then you feel it. And she would like squat 200 pounds though. And couldn't connect to her core very well because of trauma, but we could connect with her quads. And within a week or two, she was like, so I didn't tell you this, but I could barely go up and down stairs and I have all this inflammation in my knees. And she was like, it's better. Like I don't have pain going up and down stairs. It's not inflammation. And so you see a lot of different situations with people where they just, because of that disconnect, they're not even able to really recognize at first what's going on, or like when it's gone past pain, they don't see it as pain. They don't see it as a problem, but it's because that's what the brain is doing to protect. That's how it's adapted and everything. And so, we tend to just check with people based on what they're presenting as, or generally, can they connect? What is that like? And it's best in session because then we get a support through it. If there is guarding and things like that, we can help shift it or shift something, or just help people learn how to support themselves, basically.
Yeah. So I want to throw up here, for those who missed it on his bio slide, you guys can find Anton at the, can you say it for me one more time?
Yeah, it's Path.
ethicsystem.com. And also, I just want to throw up here as we wrap up that Elle, if anyone's kind of like curious about this as well, you can do a discovery session with Elle and learn more about that at mastcell360.com/discovery. And if you're kind of like, experiencing all of it, you have MCAS, and it may be there's a nervous system component, but also you're looking at how do you stabilize the other aspects and get some support for whole body healing. You can find out how to work with Mast Cell 360 at mastcell360.com/application. And thank you so much for being with us today, guys. We'll be back next week, and just leave you with one quick reminder that we're over on Substack. So if you haven't found us over there yet, you can click. We'll throw the link into the comments. And again, it's mastcell360.substack.com. All right. Well, Anton, thank you so much for being with us today. Any parting words for our audience on maybe like how to get started with this, or what to think about if they've tried everything else, or they have whole body pain and they just need a little bit of hope, right?
Yeah, I think what you just said is so accurate. I think hope, is a really important part. Here's what we know. If your issue or your symptom or whatever it is that you're dealing with gets worse with stress and gets better when you have less stress, then there is a component of your nervous system that's likely at play, which means there's likely some level of improvement that could occur if you could learn how to dial it up every time it gets loud, or dial it down every time it gets dialed up. I think understanding how much your nervous system plays a role, and it may not be the primary issue, it may just be a contributing issue, right? But until you start working on your nervous system more, you're never really going to know if it's a contributing issue, right? And so I think that for people, hopefully what they see in that is that they see some type of hope, because they see some lever or potential of control, of saying like, oh, if I learned how to regulate or how to control my nervous system more, I could probably shift my state enough where I could control some of these symptoms. Hopefully that's a takeaway for people today. And also, as far as your physical issues, your physical weakness, things like that, if there have been times in your life where you felt your body and you felt strong, and you felt, when you felt being able to run, you've been able to do those things, and then you lost it, right? That might represent something that your nervous system could do again. Just need the right path to find it. I think that's the thing for me, is that people need hope, but you know what? You need information, and you need it to be logical in order to have hope. And I think a lot of people have been led to feel, not on purpose, but they've been led to feel that they're broken and there's no hope. And I find that really tragic and very sad.
Well, Anton, thank you so much. This was super, super informative. And I know we didn't get to all the questions today, and we're even a little bit over time. So I just want to say thank you for your extra time. And for those who are still on with us live, thank you for hanging in there with us. Maybe we can have Anton on again in the future. And again, you can find him at his website here to learn more about this method, because he created it. So for those asking, like, where do you go for this? It's very, very new. It's a very new approach, but I think it's a wonderful contribution to the world of nervous system. So thank you again for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I deeply appreciate it.
See you next week, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.